This video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. with free weekly content and free shipping on orders over $150. You can save 5% site-wide by using the promo code MTGMudsta. If you're looking for a direct way to help the channel, please consider joining my Patreon and becoming a member of the generic Goblin Gang. Hey gang, and welcome back. To help celebrate Pride Month, I've got a 5-color game where each of us is playing a 5-color commander. I just want to take a second to recognize all the wonderful LGBTQIA+ members of this community and all the love and support they've shown this channel. I am playing my Jodah deck, keeping Candlekeep Sage, Rejuvenating Springs, Kedis Emberclaw Familiar, Sunbird's Invocation, a Forest, a Sanctum Weaver, and a Clifftop Retreat. Fred is playing Kenrith, keeping Jace the Mind Sculptor, Scalding Tarn, Interplanar Beacon, City of Brass, a Swamp, Atraxa, Praetor's Voice, and Exotic Orchard. Charles is playing the 5-color Niv-Mizzet, and he's partnered it up with Jengatha, keeping Felwar Stone, Rhythm of the Wild, Forest, Thief of Sanity, Maze's End, Selesnya Guildgate, and a Cascading Cataracts. Last but not least, Corwin is rocking Sisay, keeping Brago King Eternal, a Plains, Marquesa the Black Rose, Spire Gardens, Kenrith the Returned King, City of Brass, and Turgrid, God of Fright. I should note before we get into this game, there is a misplay with Kedis. Kedis does not assign commander damage. Its ability doesn't do that, it just deals damage, although I do mark it as commander damage. Thankfully it doesn't change the outcome of the game, but I just wanted to warn you ahead of time so you don't do this in your games. I win the die roll and start us off. I draw and play a Clifftop Retreat, passing. Fred plays a Misty Rainforest. Charles draws and plays a tap Maze's End. Corwin plays a Spire Gardens. I've got a Breeding Pool, which I have come into play untapped, taking 2. I cast a Sanctum Weaver and pass. On my end step, Fred cracks his Misty Rainforest to find Jetmir's Garden. Fred plays a Training Center and passes. Charles draws, playing a Cascading Cataracts, and then pays 2 for a Felwar Stone. Corwin draws and plays a Plains. He then plays Kedis. I've got a Forest Return and cast a Candlekeep Sage, passing to Fred. Fred draws and plays a Swamp and passes. Charles has a Forest Return and casts Jensen Carthalion, passing to Corwin. Corwin plays a City of Brass Return and loses 1 life as he taps it to help cast Sisay. I draw and play a Swamp. I then cast Swiftfoot Boots and equip them onto my Sanctum Weaver, passing after that. Fred draws and plays his own City of Brass. He then casts Atraxa, Praetor's Voice, passing to Charles. Charles has a Command Tower for turn, and uses Jensen to help make white, blue, black, red, and green, and cast Niv-Mizzet Reborn. The dragon enters, and Charles gets to keep Velomachus Lorehold, Athreos Shroud Veiled, Destructive Revelry, Night of Autumn, Furcrag, and Garruk, Apex Predator. He also gets to make a 4/4 Angel token from Jensen, which he finds later, and he passes after that. Corwin draws and plays a Spectator Seating. He then casts Brago and goes to combat. This has Corwin swinging Sisay at me for 5, which I take, and it also deals 5 to everyone. Please note, as I mentioned, this is where I incorrectly mark this extra damage down as commander damage. It is not. After that, he passes. I draw and play a Woodland Cemetery. I then cast Jodah and draw a card from the Candlekeep Sage as it enters. I move the boots to Jodah and go into combat, swing him at Corwin. He takes the 5, and with that, I pass. Fred draws and plays an Exotic Orchard. He plays Jace the Mind Sculptor and activates his 0 ability to Brainstorm. Going to combat, he swings a Atraxa at me for 4 and gains 4. He moves to his end step, proliferating a counter onto Jace before passing turn. Charles casts Furkrag in his main phase, and then goes to combat. He swings Niv-Mizzet at me, and Furkrag at Corwin. I take the 6, while Corwin bounces Furkrag with Brago. After that, Charles plays an Izzet Guildgate post-combat, and passes. Corwin draws, and plays Queen Marquesa, gaining the Monarchy. He then plays a Temple Garden tapped, and goes to combat. He swings Sisay at me for 6, and I take the hit again. I continue to incorrectly mark the damage, but please ignore that, and after that, Corwin draws from the Monarchy during his end step, and passes. I draw, and play Serra's Sanctum. I then cast my own copy of Kediss, and cascade into Cultist of the Absolute. Going to combat, I swing Jodah at Corwin again for revenge, and he takes it, and I also deal 10 to everyone else. Fred draws and plays a Forest. He then uses Brainstorm with Jace again, and after putting 2 cards back, casts Merciless Eviction, naming creature. I draw from the Candlekeep Sage as Jodah leaves, and the board is mostly cleared, and Fred passes. Charles draws and pays 3 to put Jengathid into hand. He then plays an Arcane Signet, and then plays a tap Simic Guildgate, passing. Corwin draws and plays Kenrith. He then plays a tap Breeding Pool, passing. I play a Sea of Clouds and recast Jodah, drawing a card from the Candlekeep Sage, and then attempt to equip him with the boots. This has Charles responding by casting Destructive Revelry on them, and I take 2 as they're destroyed. I pass after that. Fred plays an Interplanar Beacon as his land for turn, and brainstorms with Jace again. He then casts his commander, Kenrith, and passes. Charles draws and plays Garruk, Apex Predator, upticking the Planeswalker to make a beast token with Death Touch. He passes after that. Corwin draws and plays a Forest. He then plays Marquesa, the Black Rose, and Fred responds by putting a +1/+1 counter onto Kenrith. Moving to combat, Corwin swings Kenrith at Fred, and Fred opts to take it rather than trade kings. With that, Corwin draws for the Monarchy and passes. I sacrifice Jodah in my upkeep to the Cultist of the Absolute, drawing from the Candlekeep Sage and then drawing for turn. I play a Command Tower and then cast Sunbird's Invocation, passing to Fred. Fred draws and plays a Reflecting Pool. He then brainstorms with Jace again and plays Oath of Ajani, putting another counter onto Kenrith. He then casts Teferi, Temporal Archmage, and uses the Planeswalker's -1 to untap 4 lands. Fred then casts an Ichor Moon Gauntlet and goes to combat. He swings Kenrith at Corwin for 7, and Corwin responds by putting a +1/+1 counter on Marquesa with his own Kenrith and chumps. This gets a delayed trigger where she'll come back at the end of his turn, and with combat done, Fred passes, and Marquesa comes back at the end of turn. Charles draws and plays Velomachus Lorehold, and then plays an Orzhov Guildgate which comes in tapped. Going to combat, Charles swings Velomachus at Corwin and the Beast token at Teferi. No one blocks, and Charles flips his top 7 off of Velomachus, casting an Abrupt Decay for free on the Oath of Ajani. Charles then gains the Monarchy, and moves to a second main phase, upticking Garruk, making another Beast token, and then drawing his end step as he passes. Corwin draws and recasts Sisay, and then plays out Lightning Greaves. He moves the Greaves onto her and goes to combat. He swings Sisay at me and Kenrith at Charles, which gets a +1/+1 counter from Marquesa. Charles trades with the Beast token, and I take my damage. Going to his end step, the Return King then returns, and Corwin passes. I draw and play a Rejuvenating Springs. I then cast Dance of the Manse, putting 9 into the X, which lets me look at my top 11 cards from Sunbird's Invocation. I choose to cast Supreme Verdict with the Sunbird's trigger, and then I bring back the Swiftfoot Boots with the Dance as a 4/4. After that, I pass. Fred draws and plays a Watery Grave and has it come in tapped. He then upticks Teferi to do a Sleight of Hand, and proliferates Jace thanks to the Icramore Gauntlet. Fred then casts Nissa Vital Force, and adds a counter to Jace thanks to the Gauntlet. He then upticks her to untap his Watery Grave and make it a 5/5. With nothing else, he passes. Charles draws and uses Garruk to destroy Nissa. He then hardcasts Jengatha, and then a Trigon Predator as well. After that, Charles passes. Corwin draws and plays Rata Drabik. I've said this 7 times, I hope this is right. He then equips it with Lightning Greaves and passes. I draw and play a Flooded Strand. I crack it for a Prairie Stream, losing 1, and then recast Jodah, drawing a card from the Candlekeep Sage. I then equip the boots onto Jodah. I swing Jodah at Charles, who chumps with the Trigon Predator, and after that, I pass. Fred draws and plays the World Tree. He brainstorms with Jace again, and then recasts Kenrith. Fred then downticks Teferi to untap 4 lands, which he uses to help cast a Smothering Tithe. This puts another loyalty onto Teferi from the Gauntlet, and with nothing else, Fred passes. Charles draws and activates Jengatha for white, blue, black, red, and green, and then casts Athrioth, Shrouded Veil. He then uses some of the remaining mana to help cast Rurik Thar, and then upticks Garruk to blow up Jace. Moving to his end step, Charles puts a counter onto Rurik Thar from Athreos, and draws from the Monarchy before passing. Corwin draws and recasts Sisay. He then moves the Greaves to her and goes to combat. He swings exactly 4 commander damage at me, which takes me out of the game. After that, Corwin passes, and Fred activates his Kenrith to put a +1/+1 counter onto it. Fred draws and plays a Scalding Tarn. He then casts Day of Judgment, taking 6 from Rurik Thar. This has Corwin getting a non-legendary Sisay from Rata Dabrik, and Charles brings back Rurik Thar thanks to the coin counter. Fred also gets to add a loyalty counter to Teferi from the Gauntlet, and then cast Prismatic Bridge, taking another 6 from Rurik Thar. Fred then follows it up with a minus on Teferi to untap 4 lands and pass to Charles. Charles draws and plays Iroas. Going to combat, he takes out Fred with his mandatory Rurik Thar attack, and then upticks Garruk to make a beast token. After that, Charles passes, putting another coin counter onto Rurik Thar and drawing from being the Monarch. Corwin draws and plays a Sacred Foundry untapped, taking 2. He then plays Emil the Blessed and Dinah Hare, and then moves his Lightning Greaves over onto the Sisay copy. He passes after that. Charles draws and downticks Garruk to destroy Emil. He then goes to combat, swinging Rurik Thar and the Beast token at Corwin, who takes the hit and drops to 1. Post-combat main phase, Charles then plays a Soul Herder and passes, putting a coin counter onto Dynaheir and then drawing a card. Corwin draws, but being locked out of non-creature spells because of Rurik Thar and his City of Brass, knows when he's beat and scoops it up. Game review time. So yes, there were a couple hiccups in this game, which unfortunately were the result of me playing Magic late at night after having not slept much of the night before, and I apologize in advance for the Kedis mistake, and honestly with Dance of the Manse, I was pretty sure it was only until end of turn. I didn't realize the artifacts and enchantments stay as creatures forever. That being said, I really didn't get to do a whole heck of a lot with my Jodah deck since people kept killing my commander, which is probably the right move for them. Fred's Kenrith deck was kind of the same, as he wasn't really able to use his commander outside of adding some +1/+1 counters to it, and casting a lot of Super Friends and Super Friend support. Corwin's Sisay deck, however, was very aggressive as we saw early on, and the fact that she gets pumped by the other types of colors that are on the field makes her a great beater commander, plus she has that tutor ability built into her. I think the first turning point for this game was as soon as Charles resolved that Garruk Apex Predator. It gave him a way to come up with decent blockers, not to mention deal with a lot of the troublesome planeswalkers that Fred's deck was all about. Having this kind of a solid answer was then protected immensely by that Rurik Thar. It basically punished any of his opponents who were all quite low on life thanks to having the 2 Kedises out for that one turn, and allowed Charles to simultaneously build up his defenses while not having to worry too much about board wipes or interaction. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, Cool Stuff Inc., Multizone, Original Magic Art, and Alter Sleeves. But it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.